Dear friends, I have one simple wish. Please help me reach 1,000 subscribers so I can generate a small income to provide more food and clothes for my 2-year-old son. Every bit of support brings me closer to this goal. Your kindness means the world to me. Now, let's enjoy these stories together. The story begins in the old and eerie St. Mary's Hospital, a crumbling structure nestled in the heart of a small, fog-shrouded town in Pennsylvania. For over 80 years, the hospital has stood as a silent witness to countless tragedies, its walls steeped in a dark history that locals whisper about in hushed tones. Nurse Margaret, a veteran who has worked at St. Mary's for over 2 decades, recalls her first encounter with the supernatural. "It was during my first night shift," she begins, her voice trembling slightly. "I was alone in the hallway when I heard it, a soft, almost melodic whisper. At first I thought it was just the wind, but then the lights started flickering. I turned around and there she was, a pale figure in a blood-stained gown, her eyes hollow and filled with pain. I'll never forget that look." Harris, a retired physician who spent 30 years at the hospital, adds his own chilling account. "There's a room on the 3rd floor, room 309, that no one dares enter after dark. I've seen patients refuse to stay there, claiming they heard someone crying in the middle of the night. Once a nurse went in to check on a patient and found the bed empty, even though the patient had been too weak to move. When she turned around, the door slammed shut and the lights went out. She quit the next day." Janitor Tom, who has worked the night shift for 15 years, has his own stories to tell. "I've seen things I can't explain," he says, his voice low. "One night I was mopping the hallway when I heard footsteps behind me. I turned, but no one was there. Then I felt a cold hand on my shoulder. I dropped the mop and ran. The next morning, I found it lying in the middle of room 309, even though I hadn't been anywhere near that room." The hospital's dark reputation is further fueled by the tragic tale of Anna, a young patient who died decades ago due to negligence. Her spirit is said to haunt the halls, seeking justice for her untimely death. "She's not the only one," Margaret adds grimly. "There are others patients who died in pain, their souls trapped here. Sometimes you can hear them crying, begging for help." As the stories pile up, one thing becomes clear. Mary's Hospital is more than just a building. It's a place where the past refuses to stay buried, and the line between the living and the dead blurs in the most terrifying ways. The protagonist, Emily Carter, is a 25-year-old nurse who has just started working here. Fresh out of nursing school, Emily is eager to prove herself, but struggles with the exhausting night shifts. Over the past week, she's often felt drained and has occasionally dozed off during her shift, causing her to check on patients later than she should. The hospital's atmosphere only adds to her unease. Its dimly lit hallways, flickering fluorescent lights, and the occasional creaking of old doors create a constant sense of dread. While her colleagues often joke about the hospital being haunted, Emily dismisses it as mere superstition. However, one night, while gathering medical supplies in the nurse's station, she hears a faint whisper coming from the corner of the room. Turning around, she sees a figure, a woman with long dark hair wearing a blood-stained hospital gown. The woman's pale face and hollow eyes send chills down Emily's spine. Before she can react, the lights start flickering rapidly, and the door slams shut on its own. The figure disappears, only to reappear right in front of Emily, accompanied by a chilling whispering laughter that echoes in the small room. Emily screams and faints from sheer terror. When she wakes up in the break room, she's unsure if what she saw was real or just a dream. Despite her attempts to shake off the experience, she can't ignore the growing feeling that something is terribly wrong in St. Mary's Hospital. The whispering laughter, flickering lights, and ghostly figure linger in her mind, leaving her on edge as she prepares for her next shift. After the terrifying encounter in the nurse's station, Emily tried to convince herself it was just exhaustion playing tricks on her, but deep down she couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching her. The next night, as she made her rounds through the dimly lit hallways, she heard it again, a faint whispering laughter. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, echoing softly in the empty corridors. Emily's heart raced as she clutched her clipboard tightly. She tried to ignore it and continued walking toward room 214, where an elderly patient, Mr. Thompson, was resting. But as she approached the door, the laughter grew louder, more sinister. The lights above her began to flicker, casting eerie shadows on the walls. She froze, her long breath catching in her throat. Suddenly, the door to room 214 creaked open on its own. Inside, the room was pitch black, even though Emily was sure she had left the light on earlier. She hesitated, then stepped inside, her hand trembling as she reached for the light switch. The moment she flipped it, the bulb sparked and went out, plunging the room back into darkness. That's when she saw it, a shadowy figure standing in the corner of the room. It was the same woman from the night before, her long hair hanging limply, her hospital gown stained with dark patches. The woman's hollow eyes locked onto Emily's, and a cold chill swept through the room. Emily tried to scream, but no sound came out. The figure began to move toward her, gliding silently across the floor. The whispering laughter grew louder, almost deafening, as the lights in the hallway outside flickered wildly. Emily stumbled backward, tripping over a chair and falling to the ground. When she looked up, the figure was gone. The room was silent, and the lights were back on. Mr. Thompson was still asleep, undisturbed by the chaos. Emily sat on the floor, trembling, her mind racing. She knew now that what she was experiencing wasn't just her imagination. Something or someone was haunting St. Mary's Hospital, and it seemed to be targeting her. As she left the room and returned to the nurse's station, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that the woman's presence was tied to something deeper, something dark in the hospital's past. She resolved to find answers, even if it meant confronting the terrifying truth head-on. Emily couldn't ignore the haunting experiences any longer. Determined to uncover the truth, she decided to investigate the hospital's history. The next day, during her break, she visited the hospital's archives, a dusty room tucked away in the basement. The air was thick with the smell of old paper and marble, and the dim light from a single flickering bulb made the room feel even more ominous. As she sifted through old records, she stumbled upon a file labeled Incident Report, 1965. Her hands trembled as she opened it. The report detailed the tragic death of a young nurse named Eleanor Hayes, who had worked at St. Mary's Hospital. According to the report, Eleanor had been accused of negligence after a patient under her care died unexpectedly. Overwhelmed by guilt and the hospital's harsh treatment, Eleanor had taken her own life in the very same nurse's station, where Emily had first encountered the ghostly figure. Emily's heart sank as she read the details. She couldn't help but feel a connection to Eleanor, both young nurses, both struggling with the pressures of their job. As she closed the file, she heard it again, the faint, whispering laugh. This time it was accompanied by a soft, mournful cry. The lights in the archive room flickered, and Emily saw a shadow move across the wall. She turned around, but the room was empty. That night, during her shift, Emily decided to confront the spirit. She returned to the nurse's station, her heart pounding in her chest. "Eleanor," she whispered, her voice trembling, "I know what happened to you. I'm so sorry." The room grew cold and the lights began to flicker rapidly. The ghostly figure of Eleanor appeared before her, her hollow eyes filled with sorrow. Emily stood her ground, despite the fear coursing through her veins. "You don't have to suffer anymore," she said softly. "I'll make sure your story is told. You'll be remembered." For a moment, the room was silent. Then, Eleanor's figure began to fade, her expression softening. The whispering laughter turned into a gentle sigh, and the light stabilized. Emily felt a wave of relief wash over her as the presence disappeared. The next morning, Emily shared Eleanor's story with her colleagues and the hospital administration. Though some were skeptical, others were moved by the tragic tale. A memorial plaque was placed in the nurse's station in honor of Eleanor Hayes, and the hospital began to address the mental health challenges faced by its staff. Emily continued her work at St. Mary's Hospital, but the atmosphere felt lighter now. The whispers and flickering lights stopped, and the ghostly figure was never seen again. Emily knew she had helped bring peace to Eleanor's restless spirit, and in doing so, she had found her own strength. After that harrowing night, Emily couldn't keep the story to herself. She decided to confide in a senior colleague, Nurse Margaret, who had worked in the department for over 20 years. Margaret listened intently as Emily recounted the whispers, the flickering lights, and the ghostly figure she had encountered. When Emily finished, Margaret's expression turned solemn. "You've seen Anna," she said quietly. Emily's heart skipped a beat. Margaret went on to explain the tragic story of Anna. a patient who had died decades ago due to negligence. Anna had been left unattended during a critical moment, and despite another patient's desperate plea for help, she had passed away in excruciating pain from severe internal bleeding. Her spirit, Margaret said, had haunted the hospital ever since, seeking justice for her untimely death. Emily felt a chill run down her spine. She realized that Anna's presence wasn't just a random haunting, it was a reminder of the consequences of negligence. From that day on, Emily took her duties more seriously than ever. She made sure to check on her patients promptly, especially during the night shifts, and treated each one with care and compassion. The whispers and flickering lights stopped, and Anna's ghostly figure never appeared again. Emily felt a sense of peace, knowing she had done her part to honor Anna's memory. 2 years passed, and Emily had become a respected nurse in the department. One day, a new intern, Nurse Claire, joined the team. Claire was young and eager but struggled with the demanding night shifts. One night, Emily overheard Claire frantically talking about hearing whispers and seeing flickering lights. Emily's heart sank. She knew exactly what was happening. Emily tried to warn Claire about Anna's story, urging her to take her responsibilities seriously. But Claire dismissed it as superstition, laughing it off. "Ghosts? Seriously? That's just stress," she said, her voice tinged with mockery. "I don't have time for fairy tales." However, the strange occurrences didn't stop. In fact, they escalated. It began with the whispers, soft at first, almost imperceptible, but soon they grew louder, more insistent. Claire would hear them in the empty hallways, a chorus of voices murmuring her name, their tones alternating between pleading and menacing. She tried to ignore them, chalking it up to exhaustion, but the whispers followed her everywhere, even into the break room and the bathroom. Then came the lights. They flickered violently, casting eerie shadows on the walls. One night, as Claire was checking on a patient, the lights in the room suddenly went out, plunging her into darkness. She fumbled for her flashlight, but when she turned it on, she saw her, a pale figure in a blood-stained gown, standing at the foot of the bed. The figure's hollow eyes locked onto Claire's, and a cold, suffocating dread washed over her. She dropped the flashlight and fled, her heart pounding in her chest. The sightings became more frequent. Claire would catch glimpses of the figure in the corner of her eye, standing in the hallway, sitting in an empty chair, or even lurking outside the window. Each time, the figure seemed closer, more real. Claire's once confident demeanor crumbled. She became jumpy, constantly looking over her shoulder, her hands trembling as she worked. The final straw came one night, when Claire was alone in the nurse's station. The whispers grew deafening, and the lights flickered so violently that the room seemed to pulse with an unnatural energy. Suddenly, the computer screens turned on by themselves, displaying a single word in blood-red letters: "Go away." Claire screamed, but no one came. She felt a cold hand grip her shoulder, and when she turned, she saw Anna's face inches from her own, her expression twisted with rage and sorrow. The next morning, Claire was found in the nurse's station, trembling and muttering incoherently. Her eyes were wide with terror, and her nails were bloody from clawing at the walls. She had completely broken down. The hospital had no choice but to transfer her to the psychiatric ward for treatment. Emily felt a deep sense of guilt and sorrow. She had tried to warn Claire, but it was too late. The haunting of St. Mary's Hospital continued, a grim reminder of the consequences of neglect and the restless spirits that lingered in its halls. The story of St. Mary's Hospital is not just a horror tale, but a profound lesson about responsibility and change. Claire paid a heavy price for ignoring warnings and not taking her duties seriously. This reminds us that in patient care, every action and decision can deeply impact someone's life. We must always fulfill our responsibilities with dedication and care. At the same time, learn from past mistakes to avoid repeating them. Stories like Anna's and Claire's serve as reminders that neglect and indifference can lead to devastating consequences. Let the past be a valuable lesson, helping us improve in the present and future. Every day, remember that we're not just caring for patients, but contributing to their safety and well-being. Change, learn, and carry out your duties with the respect and compassion every patient deserves.
Dear friends, I have one simple wish. Please help me reach 1,000 subscribers so I can generate a small income to provide more food and clothes for my 2-year-old son. Every bit of support brings me closer to this goal. Your kindness means the world to me.